First, that two of our speakers, Jen from the Justice for More Funding campaign, and Matt, the journalist and RS21 member, are on their way here. They tell me, cool, they're on their way here. If not, we're going to have to improvise a couple of extra speeches from the public. They should be here in a moment. I'll be chairing the meeting this evening. My name's Louis Bateman. I'm a member of North London RS21 in London, work outside of London. I'm a member of the UCU, so currently mixed of industrial action, so mixed of the working class there. A couple of, we've got our speakers to explain the way to give us the political skill. That's not really what I'm here for. A couple of points of order. Thanks very much firstly to the Kurdish Community Centre for letting us use their centre this evening. Thanks very much to you for coming. There's toilets just behind that door there if you need to use them. We've got the venue till 11. Don't worry, we're not planning on actually having the meeting till 11. We've got food, we've got drinks, hopefully time for a little bit of socialising, just to have a bit of chat afterwards. The meeting's going to last for around about 90 minutes. So we hopefully have 4 speakers. At the moment, 2 of them are on their way. So the way that the format of the evening will work, I'll ask Estelle and then Bianca to speak for 10 minutes each. And there'll be a chance for you from the floor to either ask questions, to make comments, to make contributions, which the speakers can come back on, which then you from the floor can come back on. The idea is that by then the other 2 speakers will be here. Just very final word about why we call this meeting and why we've asked you to be here. This is the first North London public meeting of revolutionary socialism in the 21st century. A little bit of a mouthful. The reason why we have this group is that firstly, of course, we are revolutionaries. We believe there needs to be a total change in society. We're socialists. We believe that change ought to come from the oppressed, from the exploited, from the workers themselves, to liberate themselves. In the 21st century, well, that's the more tricky part, hopefully something that we'll hear more about this evening. The group comes from a notion, a recognition really, that the left, at the very least since the era, the last 5 years of austerity, hasn't quite met the challenge that it ought to have done. So what we're really hoping to do is in some way contribute to the existing movement and to help make sure that the left in Britain grows and that it does rise to the challenge. So that's why we've convened this meeting, that's why we'd like you to be involved with us, and hopefully that's something we would like us to continue as well. The first speaker is Estelle Peach, RS21 member, and you see rep at her school. So, Winston rep at her school. Right, fair enough. I will let you explain more.
I'm sorry this is a bit rambly, but I got off the plane about 4 hours ago. But I want to start by echoing what Louis said about the importance of having meetings like this. I feel really flat to be on the platform with Bianca, and I feel flat to be on a platform with Jennifer and back there live as well. And clearly something that is key for any new group, and certainly a group that is quite modest about what it can do. It's getting stuck into new campaigns and getting stuck into organisations that already exist locally. And bearing that in mind, I wanted to talk a bit about some of the contradictions within the system today, I think, that have led to some of the social explosions that we've seen in the past few years, whether it's riots, whether it's revolutions, or whether it's uprisings. And although those contradictions express themselves in very different ways, I think in Turkey or in Bosnia or in Greece or in Spain, I think or indeed in London, I think the social roots of those contradictions are very much the same. And so one of the key questions I think for us as socialists, or one of the key issues for us as socialists, is kind of answering 2 questions. You know, on the one hand, certainly when we're trying to prepare for when these social explosions take place, on the one hand, what is it that we can do? What is it that we are going to be able to do with the numbers of people that we have, and with the social forces, and the trade unionists, and students, and whatever composition of people we have? What is it that we are physically able to do? And that is what the crucial importance of working in United Fronts and maximising your potential and what you're able to do as a revolutionary in the 21st century. But the second thing, I think we've got to think about what do we do today? What should we be doing? And that is a really key question. Certainly I think, and it goes to the kind of heart of the question, the difference between reform and revolution. How is it today that revolutionaries use reforms to challenge the state, to enable we can never defeat racism, we can never defeat sexism unless we challenge the state as a whole. And I think one of the most fantastic things about the Dublin campaign is that actually you do hit a brick wall with the state, or actually you realise you can never defeat racism unless you challenge the state as a whole itself. I work in a school in West London, and we were having a conversation with 4 or 5 of the boys in my school who were involved in the riots. They're now in year 11. And 4 of them were, 4 of them were black and 1 of them was white, and they were trying to work out what should we do today to fight racism. And one of them said, the white boy said, thought really hard, was trying to be really, thoughtful and creative and sensitive. And one way we could fight racism today would be if we got white people to black up and realise actually what the reality of racism is like for black people. If we got white people to black up, they would realise how bad it is for black people today. And so he was grappling in his own way as a 14-year-old boy to deal with the questions of racism today. Obviously, that's an extremely imaginative, creative, and not particularly productive way to go about fighting racism. That's not one that everyone should do. But nonetheless, we do have to think about, to go back to the kind of question, we have to think about, on the one hand, what can we do, and on the other hand, what should we be doing? I think those are the key questions that we kind of need to be grappling with. And so I want to start by looking a bit at the past 5-6 years. This September will be 6 years since the collapse of Lehman Brothers. And in that time we've seen the Tunisian Revolution, the Egyptian Revolution in 2011, followed by the Syrian Revolution, which has since become much more complicated, but is a revolution, I think. We saw, of course, riots in Britain, in France, general strikes in India, Nigeria, occupations in most countries across the world. One article put it recently as, we live in revolutionary times, some of it good, some of it bad, all of it real. And so one of the things that the period has seen a lot of, I think, is the specific, kind of very sporadic, seemingly spontaneous outbursts of anger that seem to come out of nowhere. Commentators like Paul Mason have called them the graduates with no future. People like Slavoj Žižek and Tariq Ali talked a lot about these new movements being characterised by square protests, by protests in squares. And so you think about Tahrir Square, you think about Taksim Square in Turkey, Zuccotti Park in America during the Occupy movement, St. Paul's here, the square, various squares in Spain that the Indignados occupied. I think one of the mistakes that's very easy to make when talking about the period and when talking about square protests being a characterisation of the period is to counterpose them to factory protests, to strikes. So some people talk about the squares being this kind of weird phenomenon. What happens with the Indignados is this a very odd anomaly that doesn't happen anywhere else. They talk about the Indignados rejected political parties. That can't happen anywhere else. And yet, I'll talk about Bosnia in a minute. But one of the major features of the plenums of Bosnia, the mass assemblies that emerged in Bosnia, is that they reject political parties. People are talking about the squares as if they're these things that go, appear one day and then disappear, and are gone the next day. And unless the spirit of the squares goes into factories, then everything is lost. And I think, we have to, if we're going to fully understand what is going on in the period, we have to have a much more dynamic understanding of actually what the square protests mean. So you think about, to take the square protests in Barcelona as an example. Those Indignados who were in Barcelona, who were in Madrid, have not simply disappeared. I interviewed one of the leaders of the Catalonian anti-capitalist party last year, and he talks about the way the Indignados now organise in neighbourhood councils. They're trying to channel their work into the anti-capitalist party that has emerged in Catalonia and is now part of the anti-Spanish state movement within Catalonia. So, while it's absolutely true, I think we have to emphasise this, that it's only the economic power of workers within factories, within workplaces, not just factories, that can ultimately overthrow the system. I do think we need to avoid a kind of polarisation between squares and factories and see it as a much more dynamic process that can throw up lots of opportunities. So one of the most valuable things about the square protest, specifically when you're looking at Egypt, I think, is the way that it can transform democratic demands for less corruption or more regular elections, into social demands, into demands for food, for nationalisation, for forms of democracy that link economic and political power. Think of the demand in Egypt, for example, of bread, dignity and social justice. If you think of a more revolutionary demand, it sounds exactly like the Bolsheviks' slogan of peace, bread and land. Slogans that, in one sense, are very unrealistic. And at that point in the Mubarak regime, it was very unrealistic to ask for bread, dignity and social justice, and yet they're entirely possible demands. And I'll come back to that, the kind of unrealistic but possible thing at the end. It was in Tahrir Square, for example, that the leaders of the four independent trade unionists first met together to form the Egyptian Federation of Independent Trade Unions, so that it's formed a really crucial part of the struggle since. The square became a place where people come, share ideas, how they organise, and go back to test them out. Similarly, look at Bosnia and Nigeria several years ago. That is not a simple process of square protests emerging, leading to strikes. Often it's the strikes that are already existing, certainly the case in Bosnia at the moment. Already existing strikes then breaking out into mass mobilisations and feeding back in. So it's quite a dynamic process. And so to take Bosnia example, I think what we've seen there is completely remarkable. We're talking about a country that 15 years ago was in the midst of a civil war that left 100,000 people dead. And yet today, following the initial outbreak in Tuzla a few weeks ago, we see thousands and thousands of people, Bosnians and Croats, occupying government buildings, burning down government buildings together. And within those government buildings that have not been burnt down, having mass meetings, where at the end of the meeting they vote on what they want to do next. In Sarajevo, they had a meeting last week in the rain because they couldn't fit enough people in the hall of 1,000 people. In a country with a population of 4 million, that means you're talking about 15,000, the equivalent of 15,000 people here, basically. Someone asked one of the protesters what they do if the head of the EU, Catherine Ashton, or another EU official wanted to come and speak to them. They said quite simply, if the EU officials, Ashton and Fool, which is appropriately named, arrive, they can freely join the Citizens' Assembly, but with the same rules as for us all. Raising your hand, asking to speak, you get 2 minutes. Similarly, the slogans that come out of protests have been quite incredible. Death to nationalism, freedom is my nation. This is a country that in the West has only ever been referred to as something to do with ethnic cleansing, something to do with ethnic conflict, and now defying all of that. And the politicians have been scrambling to blame it on. This is a Serb conspiracy. This is Croat nationalism. This is Bosniak nationalism. But being unable to do so because the protesters are marching through the streets of Sarajevo with banners that say "I am hungry" in 3 different languages. And so to try and kind of bring those things together, I think we have to be able to ask, what is it that links all these things together? What is it that links Bosnia to the riots in England, to the protests that are ongoing in Brazil? It's quite interesting this week in Brazil. The Brazilian government have asked for French riot police to come and teach the Brazilian police how to deal with protesters in advance of the FIFA World Cup, which will be undoubtedly another flashpoint, I think, when that happens. And I think one of the things that brings them together is this huge contradiction between what neoliberalism says it will do and what it actually does. It says it will educate young people, it says it will be efficient, it says there will be no bureaucracy, it says you'll have choice in everything you want to do in life. In reality, what does that come down to? It comes down to a choice between, do you want to be unemployed, or do you want to pay £9,000 a year to go to university to get a degree and then to be unemployed at the end of it? In Bosnia, youth unemployment is 60% now. After Spain and Greece, the next country that has the highest youth unemployment is Croatia in Europe. And so once people start to realise that actually what they've been promised by the system is now never possible because of austerity, that's when these social explosions, I think, start to occur. To think of another issue that sparked massive movements in recent years, the issue of sexual violence and sexism. Why is that? Because actually I think neoliberalism, when it comes to women's oppression, shows really sharply the contradiction at the heart of the system. We live in one of the most sexualised societies in the world, and yet we also live in one of the most puritanical. I said I worked in a school. I do sex education on a Friday afternoon with year 10s, and specifically that's 14, 15 years old, who are specifically targeted for that because they know that they're having sex already and they're considered vulnerable children or whatever. One of them asked me last week, and this is a kid who goes home and reads about sex, sees sex all the time. Is it true when you're doing contraception? Is it true that if you use a female condom and a male condom, that makes fire? Right, and these things live in one of the most sexualised societies in the world, and yet seem to be entirely ignorant about most of the basic, one of the most basic things about sex. On the other hand, you have the contradiction that neoliberalism doesn't want women, doesn't actually want women to go back into the home, but does want them to feel like they have absolute responsibility for it. It's the most incredible contradiction ever. And so to sum up, the movements of the past few years, I think, they've been quite sporadic, they've been quite flexible, they've been very creative in the way that they approach some of the questions that we've struggled with in the past several decades in neoliberalism, but they have all emerged from people realising that there's something profoundly wrong with the heart of the system and trying to grapple with how to deal with it. That has thrown up some of the most exciting forms of democracy that I think we've seen for some time. The key question I think we've had an answer in, though, comes down to a question of strategy and tactics. It's not enough to be a good activist. It's not enough to be a good anti-capitalist. I think we have to look at actually what does it mean to be a revolutionary today. And that means going back to much of what Rosa Luxemburg said about that link between reform and revolution. What are the reforms that we fight for that most challenge the state? Clearly the campaigns around racism, I think, are a serious part of that. One quite nice way of thinking about it, or formulating it, I think, is to turn on its head that really famous slogan from 1968, be realistic, demand the impossible. Actually, I think we should turn it on its head, say actually we should be unrealistic, but demand the possible. That's what they're doing in Bosnia. They're demanding the renationalisation of countries. That is a possible thing to do. At the same time, it's quite an unrealistic thing, and that is exactly why it terrifies the ruling class so much. And so, yeah, I'll sum up on this. I think we have to be very modest about what we can do. The people in this room are not going to make the revolution. RS21 is not going to make the revolution, nor is it the embryo of a new mass revolutionary party. But I do think we have something important to say about strategy. I do think we have something important to say about tactics, and about the fact that neoliberalism or Keynesianism or austerity will never be able to fix the system, and the only thing that can do that is ultimately a complete global revolution.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Straight after we start, I'd like to bring in John, who's here to address us from Unity, to speak about the political formation that's happening at the moment. So, yeah,
I just want to start off by saying thank you very much for having me here tonight. It's a real honour to be speaking about racism, austerity and revolution, which is something that I'm not necessarily passionate about completely today, but by the end of it I feel like I'm going to go out and start something on the streets. Left Unity first became a political party in November, so we're really young as a party, and I think that's really exciting, because what that means is that everyone here has an opportunity to engage and actually to influence the policies, the procedures and everything, because we're new. Nothing's set in stone yet. Although there are a couple of things that I think set us apart from some of the other organisations. One of them being that we have a minimum of 50% women right from the very beginning, right at the heart of the organisation, taking the lead. That doesn't mean we're going to have 50% men and 50% women. It means that we have a minimum of 50% women. I mean, wouldn't that be fantastic if we actually had 85% women? I mean, not that I'm sure some of the male comrades at the TMC meeting would go, yay, that's fantastic, Bianca, but anything is possible. When thinking about revolution, racism and austerity, it occurred to me that one of the commissions that I'm involved in is around crime and justice. So if it's okay with the audience here, I'm going to talk a little bit about that in relation to Left Unity. We see quite clearly the difference in kind of what's happening in stop and search and all those kind of things. Let's start from the beginning. In 1972, black people, ethnic minorities, were actually considered by the media as being more law-abiding. They were a positive contribution. That's what the police said. That's how they sold it. They said, actually, look, white people are more likely to commit crime. How times have changed. What's happened is that now you're 29 times likely to be stopped and searched if you're a black young person or if you're an Asian young person in London. You're 6 more times likely if you're in Northampton, which is where I'm from. So we know right from the very beginning there's some disproportionate policing going on. It's therefore no surprise that when we come to people in prison, that we find that 10% are black young people, 4% are Asian, 3,800 are women, half are between the ages of 25 and 39, and 13% are foreign nationals. We've got averagely about 85,000 people in prison, which is quite a lot. We've only got about 87,000 spaces. So we can't afford for too many more people to commit crime tonight, because we don't actually have the space for people to go. That won't stop us getting arrested. It will stop us getting placed in prison if we're white, possibly. Not so successful if you're black. How did we get to a stage where actually ethnic minority groups are more likely to be put in prison, go through the criminal justice process than anybody else? Well, let's look at some of the things that influence us. Let's look at the media. Let's look at what they're telling us at the moment. When we see young people in hoodies, we should be scared. We should be more scared if they're black young people in hoodies, because they're the ones who are going to paranoid and going to stab us. If we look at EastEnders, and if we look at the media that's going on, all too often we're seeing young people, we're seeing ethnic minority groups, and they've been very tokenistic positions. So it's no surprising that actually, when it comes to crime representation and reporting of crime, that black young people and ethnic minority people have higher causes of being reported of crime. It's also very interesting that the media doesn't share that they're more likely to be victims of crime. And that information isn't shared as interestingly and as factually. What's also very interesting is that the police don't really have an opportunity to be challenged. When you speak to people who are stopped and searched on the street, they don't actually know that it's their right to go to the police station the next day and find out why they were stopped and searched, to make sure the police officer carried out all of the information that they were supposed to. So we've all rights over responsibilities, and that's on the side of the police as well as us. They can't just do that, but when you say to young people, would you like to go and do that? No, actually, that takes up so much time, and we don't want to be involved with that because we don't want to be involved in the bureaucracy. We also know that when you're in prison, you're less likely to be able to go through an education process that's useful. You're less likely to go through an employment process that's useful. You're less likely to be able to have access with your children that's useful. Everything becomes very distorted. We therefore see that austerity hits the poorest people, and it makes it look like a crime is a solution to poverty. That's the only way out. And actually, there are things that are considered negative. I'm quite clear that if I can't feed my family, that there's a chance that if I have to steal food, I'm going to do it. That doesn't make that crime a bad crime. It makes the fact that I can't feed my family the problem. So all too often what the government and other people are doing is they're shifting it from us, from them, back onto us. So they're doing it so well that actually you don't see it happening. Because one of the things that I've realised, being new to this political life, unlike my comrades around the room, is that the effects of Thatcherism is deep embedded, and that people are scared of not conforming. People are scared of revolution. That's why our trade unions, once we have protests, we put on buses at 9 o'clock in the morning, and then we come home at 5 o'clock in the evening because we've done our protest. And then we're a little bit surprised that there wasn't change. What do you mean? Well, because there's not change, we've gone home. That's the problem. But maybe the problem is that we got on the bus in the first place. And we were conformists. Even those of us who are involved in this revolutionary stuff are still conforming because we need that job more than ever now. We can't afford to lose it. We can't afford to be arrested. We know that if we are arrested, the chance of us getting full employment or any employment is so low that we don't go to spiral into this crime thing where we know we're in trouble. So we're kind of in a catch-22 situation. We want to be revolutionary, but we're not sure how we're going to do it. I guess that's why I got involved with Left Unity. Not because I wanted to be a revolutionary, but because I wanted to see something happen. And I can't say that I was a long-term Labour Party member, or I can't say that I was a long-term member of anything really. I just kind of plodded along. But I always had trade union values. I came from a family of trade unionists, but I was never a trade union member. So the first thing that I did became a trade union member. And at the same time, Left Unity was happening. I thought, you know what, if not now, then when? And the reason that I liked it, the reason that I think Left Unity has this potential to do something fantastic, is that for the first time, it doesn't matter whether you're a Marxist or a Trotsky. It doesn't matter whether you understand some of the terminology that's going on. I don't care what kind of socialist you are. We're all in it together. We're of the left, we're of the broad left, we can fight this together. So what the exciting thing for me is being part of a party where I can learn new words and the terminology that goes along with it, and I can bring my family. And I don't feel that as a working class young person, although I clearly know I'm not young as I said that, it's probably not quite accurate with my head at 18. But I won't feel alienated, I won't feel uncomfortable. I'll be able to say, actually, can you start and explain that to me? And they're the things that actually enable other political parties to grow really well, because we became more than comrades, we became friends. We became a social friend, we became what we're doing tonight. So the part of what we have to do in terms of the racism and austerity and crime is around having some key things. We need to scrap private contracts. We need to make sure that we have nationalisation. We need to fund community measures. We need to invest in people and social housing. And I guess that goes back to what Left Unity is fundamentally about. We're about people before profit. We're about people before business. We're about people first. Because it's the people who actually can change things. So Left Unity has this great opportunity of being a political tick box at the elections to provide an opportunity for the People's Assembly, all those movements that are happening, then to have that kind of focus point at the end. But it will only happen if people get involved right at the centre. This is what policy should look like. This is the experience that we know. That can happen in all different ways. You don't have to go to a branch meeting, but it would be great if you did. If you've got things online, you can access it at your own pace or other people's. But all I can best to encourage you is that there is a new rising of the left. The fact that you're all here on a Friday night tells me that there's a growing kind of feeling, isn't there? I mean, but enough is enough. So I'm really looking forward to hearing the other speakers. It's been fantastic seeing you all here tonight. I know that I'm going to go away learning a bit more about a variety of things, but hopefully together we can actually start to make a difference. Because next time there's a meeting like this, I'm sure you're going to want to bring a friend. I mean, not just phone them up and tell them, but actually knock on the door and bring them with you. Because that's how change happens. Thank you very much.
So I think these are the packages that is coming, so should be here in a minute. What we're going to do now is split the meeting in half, so there's time for you now, particularly if you have any questions that you want to ask the speakers who are voting, time later to ask the seconds as well. I'm going to, you can also make contributions to campaigns, you can first aid campaigns and so on. So we'll have about 20 or so minutes for that. I will, if more and more people put their hand up, I'll prioritise to try and get a bit of diversity in the room, but also the things already so. But only if there's more than one hand up, I'll prioritise it.
My understanding of what's going on in Bosnia as well is that the movement as a whole is bringing together different communities of people, and it's that process of actually struggling together, fighting against the common enemy, which is the government, that is bringing Bosnia, the Muslim community, and then with other groups of Bosnians that I think that started to speak about that specific process of uniting people across racial boundaries through the from.
You want to come back on that right now, and also if people in the audience are welcome to comment on that. There is a hand up.
I was had a question linking the two together to agree to scale what you were saying. But in terms of the new movements inside of Europe and Tagna Square, I mean, I completely agree with you that they have this, even in Spain, it's like we're not left or right, we're outside of politics. So, yet they have drawn loads of people in, so they've had this problem that they rise and then fall. I mean, isn't that really like the difficulty with this movement, that they have that character? And isn't that why when we see in Ukraine that the movement itself was initiated by grassroots activists? In terms of how the crisis plays out, it always comes back to politics. So the parties of the opposition become the spokesperson for the movement, whether the movement activists like it or not. And I guess for me, that's why like a project like Left Unity has a space in this whole period in which we're in, why they have a roots in mainstream politics.
There is another hand up, so if you want to go before,
My name is I just wanted to comment about Bosnia, because I spent a lot of my youth in the 60s and 70s running around Bosnia and other parts of Yugoslavia. And I think when you talk about Bosnia, that in many ways is a square symbol. You're all the garden history by ethnic groups. Not something that Bosnia people learn about. A little bit about the Bosnia. They're quite serious. What we had is next to incredibly national opportunistic ethnic politicians. Build up forward about that people are actually finally beginning to realize. And that's secondly, it's incredibly important that people are beginning to get away from that. Yeah, when I come down to it, I went to Germany, fighting. Nobody's ever talking about it. We're talking about Tito and leading the war against the Nazis from the we're talking about it in the really process. And I think what's really important about something is that can happen. It's very important. Largely artificial, deliberately stirred up application. Starting to look at real social problems. But that's the first thing. The second thing is things like it wasn't in the case of agriculture. I'm the chair of the thinking about to the event on March 22nd.
Brilliant, thanks very much. Do you want to make some comments on
that? In terms of, I think the really interesting thing about Bosnia is if you contrast it to what's going on in Ukraine at the moment. So in Bosnia, you do see the Bosniaks, the Muslim Bosnians unite with Croats. There was a solidarity protest in Belgrade, which is incredible if you consider what was going on in Bosnia 15 years ago. Obviously, you're completely right to say that the ethnic conflicts there have been completely manufactured by the West. Every time we talk about Bosnia, we have to talk about the role of Britain and NATO and the Dayton Agreement, which carved Bosnia up as a very large kind of very bureaucratic state that it is today. On the other hand, this hasn't come out of nowhere. Last summer there was what they called the Baby Revolution, which protests over the registering of ID cards for Bosnian babies. And it was a kind of Indignados-style, much smaller occupations that never reached Sarajevo, but certainly existed in Tuzla, which is where the protests converged from. This time, Tuzla is quite a radical city, it has quite a radical history. It was one of the main industrial bases in Yugoslavia in the 1950s when people like Cardell started bringing in self-management as well. But so it has a really quite interesting radical history itself. What's fascinating therefore about Bosnia is the way that that has come very much bottom up and spread quite spontaneously from Tuzla compared to the Ukraine, where you've seen and I want to be careful because I think we risk saying both sides are really bad, and I think it's a very complicated situation. But clearly, the fascists have come out a great force in Ukraine, and whatever happens whatever the resolution of the crisis in Ukraine is at the moment, I think we will see the fascists strengthen there in a way that certainly is not the case in Bosnia. I think it's quite interesting. People talk a lot about, to kind of link this into Luke's question about the squares and the factories and all these kinds of things. People talk a lot about the Indignados being influenced by anti-politics, or lots of these new groups being influenced by anti-politics. This idea that people don't want anything to do with any politics or any politicians whatsoever. I grew up in a Stalinist household. My dad was an ardent Stalinist. I had a picture of Robert Mugabe on my wall. Slobodan Milosevic was my hero. I did a project about him at primary school. whatever, right? If you want to look where anti-politics began, instead anti-politics began in the aftermath of the Soviet Union in those Eastern European states throughout the 1990s. My dad was in East Germany when the wall collapsed, and she was quite positive. He said, actually, maybe this could be a really positive thing. This is exciting. This is, who knows where this may lead. And then several years later, what was one of the slogans that started being daubed on the walls in East Berlin? It was, everything they told us about communism was a lie, but everything they told us about capitalism was the truth. And so there was this idea in East Germany at the time that actually, the communist utopia that they'd been told about, of course that was a lie, but equally this utopia of capitalism that they'd expected was a lie as well. And so I don't know if that's useful at all. Anyway, in terms of the question about the squares, I think there's lots of potential for these things to go either way. That is where the role of socialists, I suppose, comes in. Are the square protests going to be co-opted into already existing parliamentary politics? Often not, because of that anti-political nature that they have. Can they go into things like the Anti-Capitalist Party in Catalonia, which is quite an interesting phenomenon, I think. The guy that I interviewed, David Fernandez, is one of the MPs for CUP. He said, we talk about parliamentary politics as being like, we talk about leftists within parliamentary politics as being like playing a violin. So you pick it up with your left hand, you put it on your left shoulder, but inevitably you end up playing it with your right. And so that question, will they be co-opted by bourgeois politics, or alternatively, you look at Argentina in the early 2000s, will they just become these kind of neighbourhood councils that started off quite radical and eventually just become part of the state and part of eventually co-opted by the Kurdish regime as well? Or like in Ukraine, actually are the protests much more run by this kind of oligarchy on both sides? Certainly in the opposition there is an oligarchy as well. I think that's what, I don't know, that's not the answer to the question. I think that's kind of what we have to work out, and that's where the role of revolution is comes into play.
Thanks. If there's another round of comments or questions for Bianca, anything about perhaps as well.
I can't answer that question. I've lost me now. Absolutely. I was going to fight. If you want to, I can make it up. Sounds like a mystery, isn't it?
Yeah.
What should that be? I'm in RS, when the genuine question, what do you think will be the thing that makes that music? What was the thing that holds it together? It's eerie. For those watching that side and thinking that we can get through to the box, one of the big questions is it going to be elections? Because right now, a lot of that music works. But one of the things the problem is basically this is a great state of excitement. You've got to immensely, this is the moment when people like to go back to it, because that's the only way to get them out. So if it's an election, if it's non-election, what makes them easy tries to move it.
Should we maybe go back forward to cover the more where you're burning?
I can answer that quite easily. That's okay. Okay. Do I think that election is an important part of the FDP? I think for some members they are an important part. Do I think they're going to be what keep them to go? No, I don't, because realistically, are we going to see an FDP Prime Minister? No, we're not. Will I see that in my lifetime? Probably not. However, what it is that I think is exciting about FDP is the fact that it's about bringing everyone together. What will keep FDP together? Those of us who have never been in political parties before. That's what we're really doing. It'll be about prisoners, it'll be about travellers, it'll be about those people who never felt they could engage in the political process. They're going to do that. And what's most important is that we keep those people who are already involved, like this group here, like the ISN, involved in that dialogue, because there's the education part that we need to do. So those of us who have never been involved before, we've got a lot to learn. But the most important thing is we have to stop talking academic talk and we have to speak the language of the streets. Because actually, until we do that, no one's coming. And so for me, that's the most exciting part that I think. It's like going back to our roots, chatting to people, having a cup of tea, having a pint, saying, what is it we're going to do together? Yeah? The reason why that we're having to try to grow and it's quite exciting is because we call for each other on the way. And we walk each other home. So it's not just about the meeting. We're having a social. We're talking politics all the time. Suddenly, politics is in our hearts, it's in our homes again. That's what we've got to do. So that is a really long-term process. We're talking 20 years. Along that, we're going to do activism, we're going to do campaigning, we've got to provide a platform for those who can win elections and can win seats. But one of the important things there, it can't be spoken and stick. It has to be local people representing local people. This isn't about a platform for people to become good politicians. Yeah, there's power for us, of course it does. But if you've got strong people around you, you're going to be okay. That's what I think. Yeah? But I say that because my granny was offered to be a loyalty time to turn it down. Because he had his family roots. So what we've got to do is get that message out to people and make them brave enough to make the right decisions.
Any comments on that?
Actually, first of all, Jennifer had from Justice for Mark campaign. I'm not political. I did maybe once or twice when I was 18. This is all very, very really well. But I have to say, everything you are speaking about, I am one of the locals. I am one of the people, the academics, I'm learning. So how you are actually speaking, I would say take that to the streets, take it to the roads, and you're going to see your doors open. I'm part of the campaign. I don't want to get into certain politics, but I wish you every success. It sounds like you've got great ideas there, and I'm sure that you'll be able to reach people with issues like that. So well done.
I'm going to give you a hug later.
I think probably on that note, it's okay time to bring Ken in. Sorry, could you go to?
While we're talking about that student.
Well, yeah, go for it. I mean, we are still waiting for that to go as well, so go ahead.
I was asked just to say a few words. I'm Mike from Homegate Lecturing. And for those of you who talk about, but first of all, for those of you who don't live in Homegate, welcome to Homegate. And secondly, for those of you who do live in Homegate, there is an active lecturing group here. We meet about once a month. We do informal meetings as well, where we try to meet coffee and chat, etc. sort of thing that the answer is talking about. But we also have more formal meetings. I only moved here a few months ago, but I was involved in a Freemason lecturing group down in Wandsworth, and so I've got a bit of experience. I'm not from London originally. But I think it's been quite an exciting time, and I'm quite excited about it. I've been around the block a few times, I'm afraid, unlike I've been involved in Socialist Alliance, Respect, living in the Socialist Community in the 1970s. I spent 20 years in the Labour Party, in every group you can imagine within the Labour Party. And I think that community is the best opportunity we've had during the whole of that period to try and do something that's a bit different. I think we've learned some of the lessons we've had. The Socialist Alliance was like a federation of left-wing groups. That was good in terms of bringing left-wing groups together, but when they started walking out to their own way, that wasn't healthy. Respect was good in that it looked to and built amongst a particular minority community. It started to take elections seriously, but unfortunately it was a very top-down organisation in which we needed the members. There's no attempt to build up a membership culture. What we're doing in that community is something very different, building from the bottom up, as we talk about it. Socialism from below is a term I know some people in the room will be familiar with. And this is exactly the way that the end is saying. We're trying to build local groups, get activities off the ground. But I think also we're trying to recognise the big picture. The biggest political meeting in Britain last year, you may not have noticed, it has been the biggest political meeting, because it was the multiple cinema meetings that took place after Ken Loach's film, Spirit of 45, dotted around the country in dozens of local cinemas, hundreds of people gathered. We estimate there were over 10,000 people attended that big political meeting, if you like. It was the centre in Brixton, and Ken Loach spoke, and made a very strong point about trying to build left unity. But those tens of thousands of people, 10,000 people who came to that meeting and listened, and I was in one in Hackney, which is the nearest place to hear that showed the film. And it's unusual for me because it was the first time I'd been to a left-wing cinema film showing, and I knew more people who were on the screen being interviewed than I did in the audience of that film. There were hundreds of people who all participated in that and got interested in it. Ken's appeal had widespread interest across the country, and around 10,000 people said they were interested in that view, of whom over 1,200 had indicated that they wanted to join, they're prepared to pay money and so on. I think that's the tip of the iceberg. There was a poll last year in the Evening Standard, I think, I'm sure 50% of Labour voters thought we should have a general strike to bring down the government. It indicates that left-wing ideas do have a lot of purchase, even if they were Labour voters saying it. So there are many millions of people out there who we can build and attract attention of. But the way to do it is to build actively. So I hope that people here will get involved in left unity. It is an individual membership organisation, and it allows and encourages the space for people like the Anchor, many hundreds and hopefully thousands of them across the country. But it also respects and accepts the role and input of left-wing groups. As Bianca said, I'm in Socialist Resistance. We've been involved in left unity since it was founded. Other groups, the ISN, International Socialist Network, have been mentioned. We can work together within left unity as left-wing groups and try and build it. So I do hope you'll come. Our next meeting in Haringey is on the 12th of March. We are meeting in the Haringey Green, Social Club. It's a former Labour club. It's opposite the Civic Centre. If anyone wants to go on the mailing list, we have a regular mailing list that sends things out. Then we will get you in touch with all the different activities that we're doing. And like the Anchor, we don't think elections are going to be the biggest thing. We are in favour of contesting elections, naturally. We think it's important and it will inevitably become part of our activity. But the most important thing is to build a vibrant organisation, politically active, involved in the trade unions, involved in the communities, involved in the campaign. From that, we can build a more electoral strength, but we do that first. So I look forward to seeing you at that community meetings over the coming months. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much. Having encouraged a diversity of speakers, first there's very few after RS21 speakers that have that, but Maria would like to.
I'm from Barcelona. The time that I have been involved in the Ignares movement, and it's true that at the really beginning there was a feeling against parties, unions, and all these kind of things. But we bring the unions to the squares and we bring the parties to the squares. And what happened is that they see that we work, how we work, that we want to do the movement, that that we are another person more in the strike. And what happens is that the unions and we left the parties. And I was I'm in an organization called ELITA, that's in the International Socialist Tendency, and also in the movement that is CGP. And what happened there was very interesting because we contaminate the movement and the movement contaminated us. So it was a really, it was a win-win situation where in our mentality of classical trade union style, with the meetings very top down, very organized, these kind of things. we start changing this. We start changing the structures inside the unions, even if some people doesn't like it very much. But we start engaging people that never has been in a union, that has precarious work, women's cleaners, people from the IT sector that are without unions. So we start this process. And what I want to say in relation to David Fernandez and to this kind of this party, that I think maybe I don't know a lot of British politics, but I think that has lots of things in common with unity. Is the fact that it's very rooted in different neighborhoods. I mean, David is there because we want to, not because he wants to be there. We tell them we will be there and we will be doing this, and this. So they don't do personal decisions. It's the assembly of the party that takes these decisions. So I mean, we have 3 people in the parliament. We have thousands in the street, and these are the important ones. I mean, David is cool. I like him. I like how he talks. He has he's a very powerful person because he knows lots of things and lots of theories. But the people who build the party is the people who go flag posting at night, the people who do talks, the people who fight against police, the people that do the demonstration. This is the people that's building these interventions in the party. Because if he doesn't have us, the party is empty. So there's no content there. So it's our see, and I think it's very interesting to be involved in the movement because this kind of party has this potential. Maybe it's not the line of a lot of people in the radical left, but I don't care. I don't care. It's my opinion, and I think we have to realize how we involve in this.
Okay, well, it's a great pleasure to bring Jen Keller in. He's here, stalwart of the Justice for Mark campaign. Please take the floor.
Right. First of all, I tend to do. You want me to stand up? Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I can relax a little bit. First and foremost, I would like to just say that I do this as an icebreaker. I am so brand new at this. Sadly, I'm here not because of something pleasant. I'm here because my friends, Pam and Bruno, and I may get emotional as I speak because it's very, very touching at the moment. But Mark was murdered and executed on the streets of London. He's 29 years of age, and today I cannot, with his family, looking at the inquest, looking at the verdict, I cannot find an answer that proves that there was a justification for this type of act on our community, on our children, on our people, by the bullies, by the gangsters. I can't. Now, I became a member of the campaign because of my passion and my love for the family and because of being just. The campaign, you can go to justiceformark.com and it's 4 as in 4, and we have a page that's up and running where we try to put stuff on. It's only just started to come together from November. We're only in February, and we've had a serious perverse verdict that has just passed. So I hope you could understand that the family are devastated. The friends, the community, what that has sent out to us as a whole, that a police officer says he won, nobody else, remember this, he has an honest held belief that you have a gun and you are going to kill him. So do you know what? He's going to kill you because he has an honest held belief and he's allowed to do that. That's how clear and cut and dry it is. Nobody else saw Mark with the gun. Nobody. There's no other witnesses. Nobody else saw Mark throw out a gun. But yet the jury think it went out the window. Huh? No evidence in the whole of the inquest, but they think that. But they don't believe the police officer that he has an honest held belief. None of the police around him saw Mark with the gun. One wanted to challenge Mark to the floor. That's how much he didn't see him as a danger. But yet Mark never got a fair trial. Mark never got to come and tell his story or what his crime was. What was his crime? Was it that he was black? Is that his crime? Was it that he is young and he's from Tottenham, from Broadwater Farm? What was his crime? What did he do? I don't understand. But what I do understand and what I'm very clear about is what this construct is. And I don't care if you have the Tories, I don't care if you have the Labour, I don't care what branch it is. It belongs under a construct and it is headed by certain people. And you know what their aim is? Is to divide. Divide. I'll divide you. I'll conquer you. I'll conquer you. I'm going to give you, young man, $1 million. She's been working all her life and I'm going to give her nothing. What will happen? Human beings you're going to question. It's going to cause an argument. And this is what they do. Yes, there is racism. There clearly is racism. We know this. Yeah? But what do we do by what has happened to Mark? What do we do? Do we then start to, oh my gosh, walk around? We have to be careful for young black people. It's a fact, as Bianca said. They are more likely to be stopped. They are more likely, the death toll, the statistics from 1969 shows it clearly. More young black males. Why? Why? I'm trying to understand why. Okay? Is it because they're a stronger mentality? They have more fire in their belly. They have more, is it magnolia to the sun? What is it? Or is it because they just have to attack them in some way, and that's become predominantly their way to attack. Attack them as hoodies, as youngsters. So anyone putting on a hoodie, be careful. Don't go jogging in your hoodie. You might get shot. So the campaign now, for me, is looking at what does the campaign do? What is the campaign about? A campaign is to support a family on a horrendous road, as we know, of struggle to get justice and to hold the police to account. Who's held the police to account? Can anyone tell me? Does anyone know of anyone who's got the police held to account? A Tory MP has held them to account? Oh yes, pleb. Pleb. We can't forget that, can we? Oh, darling. Yeah, but that's about it. So the rest of us are not managing it. So what I'd like to know is, how do we do that? We're having a talk, we're having a chat, right? There's theories in here. So what is the theory then? How do we go about it? I've got plenty of theories, but people are not ready because it is frightening to understand, to blow up your thinking, to put different plants in there of what you perceive this thing to be. I could chuck bombs in here now, but I'm not going to do that because I'm already heavy, okay? And then I don't want you to bombard me and I'm ducking. But the reality is, okay, that there is clear racism. We move on to austerity. My word! Atos! Atos! Yeah, toss off! Well done for the protesters yesterday. You know, the other day, are running scared now. They are running because it's making a difference. Because yes, you have to go out to them. But I am scared. I'm scared of war. I'm scared of people getting hurt because I don't want people to be hurt. That's me. I don't want to see people dying. I value life. That's why I grieve for Mark. That's why I'm here. Because I value life. That could be my grandson, my son, my daughter, any one of us. Anyone. I walk along the road, I've never met you, good morning. That's how I am. I'm passionate for life, for human beings. Yeah? So to have a war, we go into revolution. War, I'm looking now, my God. Looking in, is it the Ukraine, Kiev? They're out there, I'm seeing people get shot on the telly. I'm like, wow, look at what they're trying to do for change. Is that how we have to do this? Really? I don't know, I'm new to this thing. I'm trying to say, surely there must be another way as a collective. We can come together, we have wonderful minds. Who puts them in power, please? You know? Oh my God, I hate all of these people. The others stay out there, but they go there. Oh, must put in my vote. Oh, must conform. Oh, must go do my little things. I can't take that robot mentality. I cannot, I don't conform. My teachers, Jenny, no, sorry. Yeah, you know, I'm just not one of them. But I could grab it on and on and on. But I am here to support the family, to bring awareness, and there are mythbusters at the front that will show you the facts of how they hide the truth, you know, what they were saying in the media, how they demonise the family. Pamela couldn't be here. She won't be here at campaigns. She's lost her husband. She's fought one cancer battle. She's fighting another. She's fighting to just be there for her one son left. Her world is falling apart. Carol Duggan, who fights endlessly, is tonight in Manchester on a panel doing what I'm doing. We are pushing with the great support of Hannah and Phil, Simon, many people have come along and supported. So if anyway you think a bit of fly posting, as you say, a little bit of, oh, I know a man who can, then I'll suck up justice for that part. Thank you so much.
Also, I'd like to say one sentence every chair needs to hear, I am not a conformist. Thanks for actually coming in this. As for non-conformists, we have Matt. All I can say is the only way first. We'll have that for 10 minutes for your final speaker from the table. We start a little bit late, so we'll have kind of 10-15 minutes. Again, if people want to make points or ask any questions, and then we'll get to the drinks food.
Okay, apologies for later writing and everything for missing the earlier speeches. I'm just going to speak for 10 minutes, pretty much kind of off the top of my head on the basis of the conflict, if that's all right with you. I just want to start with a peculiar little walk I went on yesterday. I live in a chateau, and I went to this just south of the Tower Bridge. Now, 15 years ago, if you've been around that area, it's been basically kind of flat factories, empty warehouses, council estates, and so on. You walk around there now, and it looks like basically they're still the kind of flats, but just like every 100 yards, like a random architect decided to put up a building. None of one section each other, and you can see the sort of the working class population of the area is just fading away and becoming more and more invisible. And this new breed of vaguely professional, vaguely hipster, something, doesn't seem to seems to live in one of these kind of shiny new apartments, you go to one of these shiny new cafe, coffee artisan and shops. And one of the things I noticed was on Birmingham Lane, there's this, a little tea little shop called and it specialises in that kind of keep calm and carry on, nationalist austerity chic fruits you've seen it around. Absolutely right. A couple of months ago on Twitter, there's a UK Global Association trade road, photo of the UK VA van with London British with this. So yeah, I thought that just wandering through that area and down Jamaica Road, past through all these former tea houses, former sugar warehouses that are now all kind of designed museums and luxury houses and so on. And it tells you something about how nationalism and class and the city and their rulers are all changing the world we live in and coming together in very peculiar ways. So really, I wanted to kind of look at those three things: racism, austerity, revolution, and just kind of see some initial ideas how they link up together there. Now, I mentioned the UK Water Association today. Some people know this has been going for a few months now, and has inspired some quite interesting grassroots resistance and reactions against it, harassment, and those things. Now, of course, what has been the reactions of the establishment to this? And of course, well, you look at that, and it's pretty depressing, really. When the UK Water Association raised the ban that the go home thing was announced, Nigel Farage, reviewing it, said that, well, you know, this is literally racist. So when you start getting outflanked on the right by UKIP, or on the left by UKIP on racism, you know that there's something going on there. And of course, you know, Farage is quite a clever character, really. Unlike kind of the typical rabble-rousing racist BNP or whatever. Farage has got a very sharp eye for keeping with racism just the right side of the spectacle. So when things like the kind of the attacks on immigrants and migrant workers, the APA raids, was launched by the Tories in order to try to pick up the votes, basically, and try to get some electoral stuff. What does Labour do? Take a stand in principle and defend the underdog. Labour actually just kind of comes up bad way. But Farage, who's a populist, knows that there's actually something slightly different out there, different mood on the streets. And while the political establishment might be saying immigrants to blame, black people to blame, and young people to blame, while the major political parties might be doing that to them, that's not necessarily how it goes down on the streets. And even a slightly vicious opportunist racist right-wing party like UKIP knows you can't simply sing the old hymns of the racist right in the 1970s, you know, get that and back or whatever, and get away with it. It has to modulate its message for a different kind of audience, for a different makeup, a different attitude with racism. I've always said that the kind of crucial paradigm, if you like, of racism today is I'm not racist, but no one can say, you know what's going to come, they're not going to say that is opening words of their sentence. But it tells you something interesting, that even attempts to be racist in today's society have to somehow hide themselves, they have to somehow be ashamed of themselves, they have to somehow present themselves as not being racist. If I call it politically correct racist, you know, I've got nothing against Muslims, but don't they treat them? That kind of argument. So this is the kind of thing we're seeing a lot more in Britain today. Now, in terms of what does this do? How does this racism show up? Well, there are a variety of ways in which racism today continues to happen past, say, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, but also changes it and modulates it and makes it different. One example of this is that in the past, things were very much focused on skin colour and physical values of appearances. So, you know, racism is based on the idea of black, white, brown, maybe, of particular appearances, particular genetics, of biological ideas. Now, most of that seems to have gone away these days. I think really there are two big events in the 20th century. Firstly, the defeat of Germany's the Nazi racialization, and the defeat of apartheid in South Africa at the end of the 1990s. That kind of official, full-on, pseudo-scientific racism that says, well, there's different types of people, and they different and they fit in differently. No longer fly. Instead, things have to be based on culture. They have to be based on things that aren't obviously condemnable as race. And so consequently, you're getting these kind of quite abstract categories being set up as the targets. So the notion of the migrant worker, the immigrant worker, whether they're in Europe or wherever, is being set up as the new target. All the things that people used to say about the racist, they now say about these new targets. The one thing I noticed was that all the kind of racist myths that used to be pushed against Asians in the 70s, especially concerning Asian sexuality and family life and so on. Around about 2001, simply got rebadged as stories to tell that history. So, you know, you can see how something that was once colour-based, like Asian, you look a certain way, gets rebadged as a culture. Now, I just want to draw attention back to one example of the way that racism and austerity transforming. We're living in a slightly different world in terms of racism. And the lessons and struggles and things that we've learned in the past on how to fight the system, we have to reinterpret it in a new context, given the new situation. I just want to end really with a short point about the role of sex. We think about revolution and what do we mean by that? What do we mean by that? Because I think when we see things like what happened in our government, you start, you look at the news, and then you ask some simple questions, like, what was happening with that gun? What was that gun? What were the police doing exactly? And you start to unravel it, and more and more and more and more comes out. And then you realise that you're dealing with a much more fundamental form of racism. You know, racism, you know, someone calls your name on the street, or someone announces in a pub something not you know, you can tell what that is. That's an individual thing, that's an individual thing. There's a limit to what an individual can do. An individual can do some bad things, we can go on to by an individual with enough. But a racist remark can only really kill one person at a time. When you come across the sort of racism that killed my brother, you're looking at the racism of the state, you're looking at the racism of the police force, institutions, large bodies of armed men. Now, these are people who don't just kill individuals. If you look at racism and violence, and when racism comes from the state, you're looking at a phenomenon that has killed hundreds, thousands, has been genocidal. And so, when we start to fight racism, whether it be a trivial incident at work, or in public, or a very, very serious incident like that, you start to unroll it back, you start to peel the layers away, and beyond immediacy of individual psychology, being obnoxious, you see a much, much larger system, which is sitting behind it, pumping out, pushing this back out, trying to poison our minds, distract us, and generally weaken us at a time when capitalism is in crisis, the ruling class globally is not having a clue how to get out of this. So all they do in this country is screwing us over and trying to get as rich as possible, and trying to put as much trouble to it. They're trying to make it hard for us to fight back and protect ourselves as possible. That's what I think is going on here. That's why, for me personally, what started off with the fight against racism in the 70s, I soon began to realise that there was a system behind it, and the most effective way of fighting that racism, both in terms of the long-term prospects for people and in terms of the short-term fights we're facing here and now, is to understand its role and why it emanates from a ruling class, from a state, and how a direct state and a revolutionary state can tear that state down and rebuild it by using power working class, organising some kind of cause, that ultimately is the skeleton key to unlocking a series of ideological, economic, and social geographic problems, and creating a situation in the world where we can have some justice.
We've got a few minutes to talk. We'd like to have another round of points. So this is the back, so
yeah, I want to address the question of the activities, racism, capitalism, questions of revolution. I think one example that's pertinent for me is the way in which prisons operate in America. So if you take, for example, stop and search in America with war on drugs, white people are statistically proportionally more likely to carry drugs on them. Yet black people are more likely to be stopped and searched in this war against drugs. And of course, police departments in America, the quotas is transpired for stop and search. So there's a very concerted, very conscious drive to go out in the streets and disproportionately stop and search and ultimately arrest, particularly black and Latino youth. But there's a specific reason behind this as well, because when you look at what's happening to prisons in America over the past 30 years, the increasing numbers of privatization of state-owned prisons, but also increasing numbers of prisons that are just built out of nowhere, that are private as well. And what tends to happen in these prisons is you can therefore use the prison labour either for free or for cheap. And businesses sell their products to an ever-increasing population. So you can see here there's a direct link between what's happening in the streets of New York, police stopping and harassing young black youths, and what's happening in terms of a privatised, profitable people, money-grabbing capitalist system. And so I think the anchor is right, in a sense, to say that it's good that people have been brought on into left politics through left opportunity, and I think every person on the left has to welcome this is definitely a good thing. But I do think as well we have to say that it's not enough. Because ultimately, when you analyse where racism comes from, and Jen's absolutely right, they use it to divide people, they use it specifically, they create xenophobia precisely because if the millions of black and white people who existed, who were workers, withdrew their labour and actually screwed over the system, power, that's why stop and search is disproportionately the way it does. It creates this narrative about black people. You should be fearful of them, you should be fearful of Mark Dudley, you should be fearful of anyone with brown skin. And this is why left people feel that this isn't enough, because the problem is in the very system that we live under, and that's why we raise the question of revolution and why our alternative exists in the first place. So, yeah.
Yeah, Jonas, he's on an RS21. I may need to hear the one who I want to say brilliant speech by Jennifer. I thought it was fantastic. He's done the really step up again in terms of how we start organising around the country and what countries and London and stuff like that. I want to highlight 49 years ago today, Malcolm X died. And I think that's important. And it comes into what the speaker from the students said. Because when I was a 16-year-old working class kid reading all the radical literature in politics, no, I didn't feel things were too academic or things were, too advanced. Like when Malcolm X was like 5 years necessary, and then he was like, you show me a capitalist, not show you a bloodsucker. That related to a immediate experience in my life when I saw people getting stopped in church to do up calculation. And that experience related to the idea I was formulating in my head. Working class people were too done with particular ideas, and if you set up this big organization that, I want to see how it develops and stuff like that, and I'm going to do the best of that and stuff like that. But like, let's not get into any ideas that academics are out there. But that is there's some of the contributions that I thought that would be like that. And I think that's quite worrying because, the tradition that I come out of, the IS tradition, came from the Trotsky tradition, and they fought that for a while, and they ended up in quite a bad spot for quite a while. Another point on the question of the period, I thought the discussion between you and Estelle was particularly interesting. I think one of the limitations that the struggle has at the moment is that there's a big gap between the level of attacks that are being rained down by
the other side, by the capitalists, and by the organisation, confidence, and contact of working class people today. See that all across the world. You do have political expressions of those struggle where big struggles were emerging. So you look at South Africa, for example, where sections of the unions involved the ANC called for a mass working party, Syriza, struggles and some of the analyses about Syriza, but it's a reflection of confidence, struggle, and consciousness. But like, I don't think we should have any illusions about like being able to take the pictures and bringing it to Britain. Like you're not saying, we have very different, very different speakers and stuff like that. And I think we have to think quite concretely about what is the struggle like today and how we look at the struggle. Lastly, I agree with the statement on the panel. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. I hate that phrase. I hate the person who said it, and I hate the grandson of it. But the person who the grandson asked the father did have a good phrase, and that was absolute powerlessness corrupts absolutely. So if we're talking about elections and stuff like that, actually it don't matter. If there's very working class people behind it, if there are people behind it, then that powerlessness means those people ain't going to come to account. So I think the real question is how we go through the struggle and how we understand the world around us.
And a couple, three more people who would like to speak. You're pretty concise, but also obviously quite good. So you're quite concise then.
Yeah, just a really quick one, really. I'm chair of the MCU branch at the college, and we discussed the local campaign and came to the conclusion that could be many of our students and support the campaign entirely. And I think that's obviously true for local trade unions as well. Were really clear that those lines are drawn. But I just wanted to make a quick point with them what that was talking about, because our students are from 14 up to 16, lots and lots of migrant workers that are studying English and lots of kids from the local states. It's quite an interesting mix of people, and the level to which the austerity stuff is affected is like a daily, I'm not going to be advice makers, it was just a few every day that people can cut off their benefits, often because benefit workers have kind of been bullied so badly by their management to cut off every European they can possibly find. Or someone who might be, or someone whose parents have emigrated. And that literally happens. I've lived here since they were 2 years old and have jobs and benefits that stopped. And it just reminded me that the link between austerity and racism is really, really clear. I think I once did a graph, and I'm sure that it was. But I once did a graph at the beginning of immigration control in 1995, with the introduction of the first pensions in 1906, and we go through every massive panic about immigration and it fits with the tightening of what's happening with welfare. I think that is one of the things we've got to kind of really get to grips with, how we articulate and how we kind of convince people about, because it isn't even just divide and rule. Actually, they use racism as a wedge into the whole of our class, don't they? That's I guess the division actually, is that kind of wedge. But everything they do with asylum seekers, that, I did years ago was working with asylum seekers, when they started introducing kind of the vouchers, the kind of work, the idea you have to work for your benefit when they decide to allowed to work, because that might possibly get them connected into the community and have anti-deportation campaigns. But the kind of idea that you would only get vouchers, you could only get tiny amounts of money, all of that is now coming into the rest of us. And I just think we need to kind of keep saying that to people. We need to kind of keep that agenda really clear. We should start putting those graphs into everything we write on it, because it's absolutely fascinating. They brought in immigration control as part of the notion that there would be people inside the class who could build now class and work that wouldn't be able to just produce money for them, but might actually need pensions and support.
Okay, so two quite quick points if we can.
I wanted to talk, because it's been mentioned before, what Jenna said really got me thinking about it, is what's happening in Ukraine at the moment. I think it really demonstrates some of how we can't take things for granted, how we can't fit our ideas of revolts and revolutions into a very easy pattern, an easy to understand pattern, or even easily organized. What you have now in Ukraine, I mean, let's remember in January in Ukraine, really draconian laws were passed against protest. Demonstration was basically outlawed. And major protests erupted around that. What we've seen unfold in the last 24 hours or so is dozens of people being killed by security forces, literally being picked off by snipers. And the main trade union headquarters in the country as well has effectively been burned down, and a number of people died as security forces cleared it. But at the same time, about 50 riot police have been taken captive by protesters. You know, you've got some really extraordinary things happening. It isn't as simple as I think the media make it out to be. We can clearly see that there is a large involvement of extreme right elements. The National Survival Party and the right sector organisation are heavily involved. These are Nazi organisations, and they've been carrying out a lot of extreme fighting. In fact, yesterday apparently there were armed fascists hunting police snipers, which is really an extraordinary thing because it's not really very far away from here. But it is also very much a popular uprising against corruption and exploitation and repression. And of course, the laws being passed against protest itself. It's not just about the European Union, it's not just about the Liberals pushing that agenda, and it isn't just about the right-wing uprising. This is a revolution, and revolutions are messy. And I think that really underlines the need for us to understand the dynamics of a world which produces these tensions. We need to understand the dynamics of how we develop resistance to oppression and exploitation. Because otherwise you won't be able to explain these things. And when things like this come closer to home, we won't know what to do, we won't know how to understand what's going on. So I think it's incredibly important. Not only do we have meetings like this, but also we organise in ways that, that Jen and Bianca and Estelle and Bat have talked about, because that boosts our own understanding of ourselves and the ways in which we resist capitalism.
So just wanted to talk about some of my experiences being involved in sort of politics. I developed that sort of background of a very poor family who are migrants from other countries trying to do that. And it came from sort of the nature and way in which they raise those kinds of communities raise their children. And it's often a very sort of entrenched sort of patriarchal disciplined rule in which the black nation are raised in Britain today because of the way in which the diaspora are disconnected from their countries and really sort of got a back foot here. And they find it hard to sort of get clear. And out of that, you see the way in which the dynamics in, for example, drug registration play out in a lot of inner cities. In London colleges, you find a lot of kids from black and Asian backgrounds are really disadvantaged, and their education doesn't really fit them. Sort of where the origins of sort of becoming conscious sort of begin organically. And I think that is interesting in terms of the way in which we look at what's happened in Britain in the last sort of 5 years. If you look at student protests, while the US called massive demonstration nationally, what was the sharp edge of it was the inner city ethnic students who were mainly angry for 8 months to stay with just 1 day to come out repeatedly. On top of this, you can see the continuation of police racism, of less in custody, of just daily lived experiences of harassment, or feeling like you're always being watched, or feeling like you're always being caught around the corner and blamed for something and end up in prison. It's nothing to do with you, of the way police force works, because the way the prison system is working at the moment and developing to make profit out of that. And I think you see how that manifested, and that manifests itself when Mark Huddy was killed. And it was something in which you didn't have to know who Mark Huddy was, but he was instantly your brother and your sister. It's instantly part of your family. You think you could have been an uncle or father to you, because you know the way in which that the same feeling inside it's the same feeling that Mark had day in, day out. And that's why loads of young people came out on the street. It's important, I think, there to see that, you know, it's not some, the sort of dynamic between exploitation and oppression is an important one in which we can't emphasize the extremes of both. We have to recognize that exploitation and oppression do happen. We can't just focus on one. So it's interesting to see the debates on the left about what do we do now? Do we reorientate towards trade unions? Do we reorientate towards communities? And I think it's important that left organizations today have to do both. We have to relate to people with reality, social experiences today, but we also have to point to the way in which we can change society on a mass level, which is through workplaces, which is through economic change. But that doesn't mean that we subjugate oppression, and it's a very important debate to production, for example, with factories. I think it's really important that the left in general needs to start sort of reconnect to working class people today. There's a big gap. We're having a lot of debates, and it seems like a big canyon with us. People going to work every single day, and you have to identify it, you have to acknowledge it, and then you have to sort of ask why. And I think there's a very simple steps you can initially take. For example, in Britain, we set up an organisation called British Black Revolutionary Socialists, and that was just an attempt to sort of start pulling black people into the left. It was sort of like my experiences in my 80s, because there is a legacy of history between black communities and the left. And it is a one building of that is a lot of youth. I think today we sort of have to start bridging and patching over those experiences between the left and black communities and also the Muslim communities as well. So that was just an attempt. We managed to get in around 5 to 10 young people and also expanded to North London. So we have some people, around 3 people who are in Tottenham chapter. But it's just an opportunity in which the left is starting here to the we have revolutionary politics, which are extremely powerful when it comes to organizing. It's powerful enough to that every experience. And it's important that we go sometimes into those places where people are hesitant to get involved, that don't know we exist, and put them into the class struggle today if we want to grow.
If anyone on the platform does want to come back, we just for about a minute, because we need to start. But yeah, I don't want to.
Yeah, I guess it's a couple of things that I want to say. One thing, let's be quite clear, the left community doesn't think tomorrow we're going to have 1 million members. But what we do think is if we do exactly what I'm going to say, which is we need to do all of things. Not one thing or the other. It's not elections or the activism, it's about both things and doing that. It's about engaging in education and placing that first. I think the interesting thing that my comrade said out there about prisons is that if there's going to be a revolution, might it be interesting that that's where the riots spark to. I mean, we're seeing growing amounts of people in prison who can't fill it up and not expect something to spark off. I mean, so revolutions come from the strangest of places. Don't necessarily expect that won't happen in England, while we're looking at too many people and we're not making long-term changes for members.
Anyone else?
I was just struck by something the lady said about the reaction to youth that march, particularly when you're students, and I think that's quite symptomatic because there's a whole swathe of working class young mixed race Britain who saw that happen and thought, exactly my brother, that's me, that's the neighbour. And you contrast that with the media narrative that presents Mark Dutton as the black gangster, the demonised figure. I remember arguing with the racist in the public weeks ago who was just, the guy's a gangster, it's clean placed up, it's in the streets, and there's kind of them and us. And the way that, despite a uniform, consistent media narrative saying Mark is one of them, people instantly say, well, he's one of us actually, so he's like a thing that the police. I think that's very important. If you remember the initial reaction after the riots, we were treated to one idiotic sociological thesis that reaches after another about how, mission is creating young people to desire trainers on both windows, or something like that. You know, it's funny, 2 years on, no one comes out with that. Everyone knows that this that's very basically that's why they're right in the streets of London. So, you know, however down we might get in the present circumstances, you know, there's been this campaign with rubbish in the press about the youth killing project. You know, and that scares off the liberals and that the establishment. In a year's time, people have forgotten about all of that rubbish, but where did that come from? That question's still going to be unanswered. You know? So, the other thing that Elaine mentioned, I think is really, really important, is the way that benefits workers and the benefits system, the public sector. Over the past 15 years, piecemeal has been reorganised by a whole load of first New Labour and then Tory reforms, incentivisation, managerial schemes, team-making schemes. When people talk about neoliberalism, they say, oh, it's the private sector, it's that, the private sector today, everything's a market, but no. If you look, one of the key features of neoliberalism has been the way that these big state institutions like the welfare state, the NHS, the education system, have been transformed on a really low level by kind of micromanagerial techniques. One little example, her GP receptionist had to check the immigration status. And this started coming in 15 years ago. I remember in about 2000, working through Bethnal Green. New Labour had just come in, there had been more person to do it. Racism was no longer trendy. Anti-racism was good, but there was just shit. Asylum seekers. Isn't that what they just said about asylum seekers? Racist. And I remember seeing socialist worker posters about 2002 with asylum seekers welcome here. And I was thinking, well, you know, they probably are, but I'm very glad someone's gone and put those posters out there, you know? And I think that in terms of us understanding how good neoliberalism is, we need to understand how it's affecting public sector work. And how, yeah, it's very, very easy to say very quickly, oh, racism involves class, racism involves class, we want class unity, get rid of racism. What do we mean by that? We need to look at how those processes work. You know? The final point I want to make is completely random on Ukraine that Zuhair mentioned. There's a really interesting article by Ukrainian investors. They're basically saying, you know, with the capacity of ordinary people in Ukraine to politically organise far exceeds their political imagination. Because their political imagination is circumscribed by what the system says, here are the available options. Do you line up with the EU? Do you line up with Russia? Do you line up with so-and-so? Now, but people's ability to organise and work their way around the state and take on the states is far bigger, has a far greater potential than the particular demands they're raising at the moment. So I think it's very important for the revolution, especially in the IS tradition, to understand what's going on in Eastern Europe in a very different way, I think, from other groups of the tradition. Look at what's happening there, and it reminds me of what happened in Hungary about 5 years ago. It was called the tracksuit revolution. There were working class groups rioting, and the left failed to support it because they said, oh, well, the racist, who are these people, we're in favour of the sort of, the neoliberal but socially progressive social democratic parties there. And I think it's very important that everyone on the left understand no matter how bad, no matter how deep this is, what's happening in the UK. These are the masses rising up against their state, and we should back them just as
Estelle, I want to make very quick.
Yeah, just really quickly, I think one of the really interesting things about working in the school is that it is a microcosm of society. And so in the school that I work, I was there for the June 30th strikes 2 years ago, the November 30th strikes, and then the MET strikes this year. And 2 years ago, we had a kid from our school who was a Nigerian boy. He was there in English one day, and the next day he was gone because the border police had come to his house in the middle of the night and taken him away. We just got an email saying, by the way, so-and-so isn't going to be in class today, he's gone back to Nigeria. And 2 years ago, the teachers that I worked with said, oh, you know, what are you meant to do? He's here illegally, what can you do? It was a brand new academy, it was one of my proposed flagship academies. You know, what are we meant to do? Is there something we can do about this? And then 2 years on, at the MET strikes this time, actually we start to talk to them, and they all start to say, actually maybe it isn't okay that the border police come in the middle of the night and take one of our students, maybe that's not all right. And then the police came in to do a presentation about gangs. And one of the kids put his hand up and said, you talk to me about gangs. Yeah, the gangs are my state Battersea. Yeah, there's the one called the Stick 'em Up Kids gang, which is one of the worst gangs of Battersea. Yeah, but they run these gangs into us. But they're nowhere near as organised as your gang is. They're nowhere near as organised as around London, murdering any black kid. And then the police kind of said, oh, well, we're not a gang, we're an officially backed gang, effectively, and handed out these rulers. So they handed out all these Metropolitan Police rulers, and then the kids just started stacking them in the middle of the wall. So we don't want these rulers, we just stack them in half. So, you end up saying, and then they turned to the teachers and said, look, 2 years ago, you completely abandoned us when Franklin got kicked out of the country. Now where are you? We'll back you on the MEQ strike, if you're going to back us on this. And so there was this incredible kind of feeling of, how do you create solidarity between those kids in the school and the teachers in the school? The teachers in my school, it's one of the newest academies in London, are divided in every single department into the head of teaching, the head of learning, and the head of atmosphere. The head of atmosphere is effectively in charge of the corridors. And is atmosphere okay? Are the boards in the office nice? Is everything look nice in the classroom? The kids know that's bullshit. The kids know this isn't a real job. But it took the kids saying, do you realise the head of atmosphere is a non-job? That is just, again, divide and rule within the classroom. And so, yeah, I'll finish on this. I think when people talk about the way racism changes, it's fascinating. When the second time that the police come to my school this year was just after Nelson Mandela had died, they did this wonderful presentation about how important Black history is and how Nelson Mandela is this really important, peaceful figure of Black history. And one of the kids put his hand up and said, listen, didn't Nelson Mandela blow up cars? And this policeman kind of stood there and went, oh, I don't think so. I don't think Nelson Mandela I'm not really sure. So when I banged on at the beginning about the difference between factories and squares and that we mustn't kind of siphon these things off, it's not, I've recently read a book by a Russian revolutionary called Shkotnikov. It's his reminiscences of 1917. It talks about postering and making leaflets, and going into factories and going into the streets. It has an argument with someone about, do we want Russian revolution on the streets, or do we want them in factories? And he says that's not the point. This is not about whether or not they're in the squares, because it's too cold to be in the squares in Russia anyway. But this is about how it's not about where you struggle, but it's about how you struggle. And so to finish on what Joan said, this isn't just a question. Our question about revolutionaries today, what our revolution is organised, who is serious, it's going to be answered by who are the revolutionaries who can actually match where class consciousness is with getting class confidence up to that point as well. And that is how we will work out who are the most serious revolutions, and they may not even be in the street.
Okay.
I'm trying to take in all the information. There's been a lot of things that said, yes.
That takes quite a lot more information. And do you want to make it a nice really easy focus? Thank you. Okay, well, as quick as I can, obviously we're in North London, we've both forget about smartphone. There is a history of this kind of activity in Tottenham in particular. PC Blakelock, till 30 years ago, a trial is occurring now 30 years after PC Blakelock's killing of Nicky Jacobs. There's a Nicky Jacobs is innocent campaign to say that these are trumped-up charges. Sunday in the North London Community House in Tottenham between 2 and 5, there's a campaign launch there with Staff Scott, Lee Jasper, Cynthia Jarrett's family, and so on. There's a campaign stall at the back of the room, which I urge people to look at. You will have these leaflets with our very fancy future meetings RS21. The 8th of March is International Women's Day, There's a festival of politics and of culture of International Women's Day on the South Bank of London on the 8th of March. We cover a lot of points. We all know as revolutionaries, as people on the left, as socialists, as campaigners, that we're better when we work together. You are also invited to contribute financially to RS21. We're standing order forms to join RS21. We did pay for the room there. This is, this is something that we've laid on for people, however, also we would like to make a contribution towards the room cost. Exactly 3.5 for people, there we go. Please again, feel free to give us help if you like. Fold it up, give it to David. And I think that is it for a meeting. Thanks very much.